Finding ownership, because there's so many different types of user research. How we can find the bigger picture with our users. I'm going to share some best practices for research, which I really like to adhere to. And then also, finally, that wasn't supposed to happen.
We apologize for any inconvenience. The alarm has been determined to be false at this time. No evacuation is required.
Oh, good to know, right?
We apologize for any inconvenience. You may resume all normal activities.
Well, glad we got that out of the way early on. Yeah, thanks. And finally, research toolkit. So starting with defining ownership, I get asked a lot, how's Canva structured? You know, we're a pretty big company, we've experienced hyper growth, we're at over 75 million MAU right now, and we're a distributed company, so we have a lot of our company are in Sydney, Australia, and then we have offices in Austin, San Francisco, China, Philippines, all over, and we recently started opening in London to build out EMEA. So I like to talk about how it's structured with product marketing. It's a relatively new function still for the company. We only really started hiring in about a year or so ago. But how it typically works is a PMM is focused on a product, a core product or an audience. I'm working on the education side. And then we're partnered with PMs. Right now I have 2 PMs that I work with, but some of the other PMMs have a lot more. I think the ratio is typically 1 to 3 or 4. And then within the same group, but not working as tight-knit together, we have researchers, we have designers, and we have growth people who are running experiments. So when we're looking at research holistically here, we've got 3 pieces of the puzzle. We've got our market research, user research, which is primarily like qualitative interviews, etc., and then looking at our analytics to piece together product research as a whole. And of course, you might not have researchers in your company, you might not even have a product marketing function in your company, but we all need to understand our users. So there are so many different types of research and so many teams involved. It's a real cross-functional effort. So when we look at what do we do as PMMs, what does that look like for research? Here are some of the good examples that I like to think we own, but then we also do some of this sometimes, right? A lot of people are doing brand awareness. We're probably helping out with growth experiments, helping inform the messaging, for example. We're also helping out wider marketing team with landscaping, looking at customer satisfaction if we're doing NPS surveys, etc. And then finally, this one, which gets really interesting because there's a lot of overlap between PMMs and designers here. Who actually owns personas? Well, I thought I did, but a lot of the time we have our designers working on it. And the same with research and jobs to be done. There's a lot of overlap and a lot of responsibilities. So yeah, it can be overwhelming. There is a lot of ground to cover. But when it comes down to it, we're all in the same boat. So we're all trying to build a shared empathy for our users, gather this knowledge together, and build it into a bigger pool. So when I think about the difference in how we manage user research, it's really about the questions we ask and the methods that we use. So how do we take a step back and find the bigger picture? So really, this is how I like to break it down into this matrix. We've got the piece at the top around how we find the users to bring them into our product. And then this flows down to the bottom, how do we enable users to actually use the product? And then across here, we have more empathy-based and more task-based actions that our users will do. So to answer these questions, we need to be asking these questions. Where are our users? What do they do? Why are they doing the things that they're doing? And how do they actually do it? So if we ask these questions, we can put the pieces together and figure this out. And that helps build a big picture of our users. So a way that we've approached it at Canva that has worked well in terms of how we split out responsibilities between our PMMs and our design product teams are having these 2 different persona types. The first one we call a finder persona. So these are the audiences, the users that really need our product, where we're solving a problem for them. And how we actually talk to them, how we bring them in, the messaging, the positioning that we use to draw in those users to our product. Whether we've got product market fit, which is obviously super important and always top of mind for us as PMMs, And then wider market trends, so looking at our TAM, total addressable markets, new markets, changes, competitive analysis, how the market's trending over time. And some of the typical ways we do this are through surveys, panel testing, some interviews, but not the focus of it, more that quantitative piece. And then on the right-hand side, we have the enabler persona, which is typically owned by our designers, our researchers. And they're getting really deep and exploring what are the key problems in the journey that they're on, what are their behaviors, their aspirations, what's stopping them get to where they want to be, and what are their product requirements. And we do a lot of in-depth methodology here for interviews, panel testing and some surveys, but again, getting really deep. And we found this is a good way to split it out. But of course, we want to make sure we're framing the problem in the right way when we're doing our research. So we might do a survey, and here's an analogy, the elevator analogy, which some of you might be familiar with. We might hear something like, the elevator's too slow, and an equivalent in SaaS might be, the wait time's too slow when I'm loading a page, or I can't get to this page in time. So we automatically think, all right, what's the solution here? Obviously, we want to make the elevator faster. Here are the things that we can do to make the elevator faster. But we have to think about, is that the right way we want to frame the problem? So it's not necessarily that that's the wrong problem to address. It's more that we need to explore different solutions and different aspects of a problem to understand how we can provide better solutions that make more sense. Because typically a problem is there's not a single cause, it might be multi-causal. So instead of thinking, okay, let's make the elevator faster, we should also listen for things like this, where we're framing the problem around the wait rather than the actual elevator itself. So if we frame it in that way, ultimately the goal is a bit different. We actually want to make the wait feel shorter rather than make the elevator faster. So I love using this analogy to think about how we're framing the problems that we hear from our users to be able to deliver the right solutions for them. So how can we align on that? So here are some areas of research that I do like to cover. So in product surveys, when I do webinars, I send a survey afterwards, doing customer advisory boards, checking in with them, competitor research, market and trends. And then like I was saying earlier, our designers and research take on the deeper desktop research, collating all the company-wide research and user interviews. So here are some things I might hear and that my designers might hear when we're doing this research. That's a lot, right? That's a lot of things to hear. That's a lot to cover. So how do we piece that together to build a rich picture of our users? So it's all about collaborating together to understand how we can put the pieces together. So that looks overwhelming on its own. But if we actually piece them together, we can start to build out a big picture. So for example, a Microsoft Teams integration gives us insight into how they're actually using Teams in context with our product. Someone saying something like, oh, I love using Slack, is related to them wishing they had less time to spend on their emails. So how can we solve that problem? Someone using LinkedIn to hear about trends might be the right way to interact with them. And they become a persona that's on the lookout for new tools, looking for new trends. And so on and so forth. So if we piece these together, we can build a really rich picture. So moving on to some best practices I like to adhere to when I'm doing user research. And a lot of this, may be your bread and butter, you may be super familiar with this, but I like to recap on it. First of all, it might exist already. There is a lot of research in any company at any one time, and it's probably lurking all over the place. So when I started at Canva, it was like, we use Confluence to manage like an internal wiki. A lot of scouring Confluence, a lot of searching for decks, a lot of talking to people to see what's already there. Don't want to duplicate efforts first and foremost. But when it comes to delivering surveys, here are some of my best practices. So asking very direct questions and asking one question at a time is, of course, vital. So the trigger here is using the word "and" might confuse users. And of course, avoiding leading questions, and this is a trap that's very easy to fall into. And I'm always asking, to sense check the questions I send out to make sure it's not deliberately leading our users to bias in a specific way. So rather than framing a question in that way to lead them to a specific answer, keeping it very open. Speaking your respondent's language, we use a lot of internal jargon, and sometimes I can really forget that. And I have an actually example of that. We were doing some landing page testing this week, and we used a term like hero section and realized that doesn't resonate with our users. And the user that was testing it was actually looking for a section on the web page saying hero. They were like, where's the hero section? But for us, that was second nature. That was the top part above the fold. So really being aware that they don't have the same insights as you. Identifiable information, making sure they have full consent, only sharing with the right stakeholders, and then also being kind. So giving them time to take a break if you're interviewing them, giving them kind time zone slots, being aware where they're located, and making sure that you're debriefing them as well. And at Canva, we've really wanted to work hard on building a culture of research where everyone can participate. So it's not just the PMMs, it's not just the designers and researchers doing this, but everyone feels like they can share this. So we do have some Slack commands that we use when people want to share a quick insight. We have dedicated research channels, and we also host brown bags and wikis where we share our information directly with people, and that's all recorded, and you can watch it at your own pace. That's a really good way to keep in the loop and keep others in the loop and remind them of the value that's being delivered by this research. So moving on to my final section, I just wanted to talk through a few tools that we use day to day at Canva that we love for user research. The first one is Dovetail, which is a really great repository tool where you can upload your interviews, you can get transcription, you can highlight and share key insights, and it's a really great way to build out a deep analysis when you've got a lot of interviews that are coming in. And user testing is a great one that we use for our concept testing. So this is a tool that sources external user panels who are paid to do market research. So for that, we like to test out prototypes, we like to do usability testing, testing our positioning and messaging of specific products. It's worked really well, and then you can just watch these back, and they record their screen and talk over what they're doing. Another one is a smaller tool called ProdSite. So for me, I don't know about everyone here, but when you've got a survey with a ton of data in it, how do you even start to dig into that and build out themes? And this has been a great tool to auto-tag large data sets to understand themes, issues that are arising, so you can start to map out a picture, and more importantly, over time. So I like to visit this every month with a questionnaire I do in the product, to understand what's changing over time and what new messages and themes are coming out of this questionnaire. And then Respondent is another great tool for actually sourcing people to do your research interviews, for more in-depth interviews, prototype testing, again, all of that good stuff. And then finally, I do love Hotjar. This is great for in-product surveys if you want to do a quick sense check. It's good to take it with a pinch of salt. It's those little pop-up surveys that you can put on your landing pages or in the product. Quickly ask them something, do some scoring, do NPS survey, for example. And also what's great are heat maps, so you can actually track where your users are looking on a page and where they're being drawn to and where they're clicking. So also love using Hotjar for those purposes. So that's the end of my session. I'd love to know if there are any questions. I think we've got the Slido that we're going to put up. But it was really great to talk to everyone today, and I really hope you learned some insights, and I'd be happy to talk later about user research if anyone wants to talk more about it. So I've got a couple of questions here. How do you help users with adoption of the platform? Yep, I'll take that one quickly. So really, once we've done our user research, we can then start to build out priority areas, and whether that is, a new development, new feature, or a different journey. So a lot of work we're doing right now is revisiting our onboarding journey and the learner journey. So what that looks like and understanding how that differs for different types of users. So where are the key points in the journey they're getting stuck or they're looking for inspiration and help, and what moments we can help onboard them and to drive greater adoption of that. Something we learned from recent research. How did you do the research and what did you learn? Yeah, great question. So something we learned pretty recently around using Canva, so thinking about the education perspective here, is that a lot of teachers are using the product to create great content, but then they're going elsewhere to deliver learning. And this was something we kept hearing about. We did interviews, we did some in-depth surveys where we did stack ranking of other products that they were using to deliver teaching and deliver learning. So it became really apparent to us that we need to do a lot more to make the product more interactive for our users so that they're staying in the platform. So that's a big one we're trying to work on currently right now, is keeping our users in the product so that they can use it for different purposes and not just creating content, but also communicating through it. Do you incentivize customers? Yeah, great question. So right now, using tools like respondent user testing, they are paid panels. Other good ways to incentivize people, things like gift cards work pretty well. We also do a lot with swag, because that tends to be a really good incentive, especially on the education side. And how are we doing for time? We've got time for any more questions? Yeah, we're all good? Awesome. So I'll take the last one. How do you differentiate between a user persona and a buyer persona? Great question. So we will typically split that out based on the subscription model, so understanding at which level a persona is ready to buy. So I'm working on the education product, which is actually free for teachers and students. So I'm focusing primarily on our user personas, but we have other PMMs who are working on the different subscription models and understanding how to split out the buyers from the users. So really it's two pieces of research that need to be brought together holistically. How do you yeah, great question around, oh, that one dropped off. Have you used research to inform pricing and packaging? Yeah, doing a lot on that one right now. So that's a really good one. I'm not super involved in that, but yes, we have used a lot of research to help inform how we're packaging that and how we're also doing a lot on our pricing page to understand where are the drop-off points, where are people getting stuck, how do we get them through that sign-up journey. All right, cool. I think that's everyone for now. Well, thank you again so much, everyone. Really appreciate you being here and hope you learned something. And look forward to meeting you all later. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Danielle. This is fun. We have a lot of questions coming in through Slido and folks using the elements there. So next up, we have a very exciting workshop coming to us on the topic of how to execute win-loss analysis. How many folks would like to know a little bit more about win-loss analysis? I know that this is near and dear to all of our hearts, and so I'm super excited for our next set of speakers. Coming up to the stage, we have Jonathan Stevens, who is the VP of Consulting at Closed. So as VP of Consulting, he actually manages some of the most key accounts, and he mentors and coaches some of the other consultants. In fact, he spent some time as an engagement manager at Cierto Group, a top 40 management consulting firm that specialized in market research. And we also have Braden Anderson, who is VP of Operations at Closed. Now, Braden's job is to ensure the successful delivery of win-loss programs. So I think we really have a key expert here. Prior to being at Close, he's been at Qualtrics, and he founded the dream team that worked on the target audience product. So please give a very warm welcome, loud round of applause to Jonathan and Braden.
Hey everyone, can you hear us okay? Is it coming through now? Cool. Well,
so I was really excited when people actually raised their hand and they said they wanted to learn about this. So
we thought there were going to be no hands going up, so we feel a little more validated being here today.
Exactly, yep. So we're excited to be able to talk to you today. Like was mentioned, we're going to talk about how to execute win-loss effectively. A lot of people are doing win-loss in some form or another. We're going to talk about some best practices and a couple of things just to get out of the door right up front. We want to make this an interactive session. So we have Trenton right here, our esteemed colleague. He's got a microphone here as he's going to go around and give it to anybody who wants to ask a question. So
yeah, this is intended to be more of a workshop. We have a presentation, but we want this to be a workshop. So if you have a question, throw something at us, raise your hand, and Trenton will bring the mic over, and we can make sure we get those questions answered throughout.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so we already had a little bit of an introduction. I'm Jonathan Stevens. I'm the Vice President of Consulting at Closed. So oversee a lot of programs that we run. Basically have a hand in some of our largest accounts. Prior to Closed, I was doing market research, so it was a pretty natural transition to a firm that just focused on win-loss analysis and doing that. And then before that, I was at the University of Chicago for an MBA.
Yeah, we're really excited to be here. We love working with product marketing managers. As mentioned, I actually was a product marketing manager at Qualtrics. You guys may use Qualtrics to run a lot of your programs, your surveys and whatnot. I run operations, so John and I collectively, it is our jobs to make sure that we deliver high quality win-loss programs for our clients as efficiently as we possibly can. Is really the essence of what we bring to the table. And so we have a lot of experience running win-loss programs from, I think Jonathan has done over 1,000 win-loss interviews over the course of 1,300.
Yep.
So we
Not that anybody's counting. But.
Yeah. So we've got a lot of experience, and we hope to be able to convey a lot of that experience to you guys today. So the first thing we actually want to do, this is fun for you guys, is we have 3 Bose headphones that we want to give to everyone. So pull out your phones, pull out your cameras, and I promise you this is not a ploy to get your contact information for us to call you after. I promise. You do have to tell us your name so that we can award the winner. Like Trenton's going to come up in 2 to 3 minutes. There's 2 questions about your win-loss program that we just want to get a census, a poll basically, and then obviously we want to enter you. And so we have the 3 headphones here. We're not going to spam you over the next 6 weeks, etc. But the most important question actually is the first question. We're from Utah. Barbecue is not really a thing in Utah. We asked a lot of our friends that had been to Austin, like, where should we get some good barbecue? We'd rather hear from the locals. So the first question has what they suggested were the top 3. We want you guys to tell us where we should go get lunch tomorrow. Okay? So while you guys are finishing that up, we recently ran a study on product marketing managers, but individuals that run win-loss, and we want to share some of those while you guys are finishing this survey really quick.
Yeah, so a couple of really interesting stats about win-loss that come from this study that we ran. 79% of companies currently practice some form of win-loss analysis. So this is a pretty popular thing to do. People realize the importance of it. They're doing it in some form or another. The other thing that's an interesting stat here is that 64% of win-loss analysis programs are less than 2 years old. So this is a pretty newly emerging thing. I didn't have a class on win-loss in college. I don't think people were really talking about it then. Maybe that dates me, but anyway. And the next one, okay, to be fair, anytime I see a statistic that says 98%, I think this must be fabricated, but this is real data that this is actually what we found in the study, that 98% of companies plan to maintain or increase their level of investment in win-loss analysis. So it's kind of addictive. Once people start to get this kind of feedback and they start to really get to the heart of why they win and lose business, they just want more of it. And we're going to talk about effective ways to do that in a minute, but some interesting stats that we've learned as we've been doing this and as we've surveyed companies that do win-loss.
Okay, Trenton, let's come on up. Let's award some winners here and see what the polls have to tell us. Where are we having lunch tomorrow? And we didn't have an other option because it was making things too complex, but if you have other suggestions, come and tell us.
Come to the booth after, yeah.
All right, so I'm hoping you'll let me join you, but it sounds like you guys are eating at Franklin Barbecue.
Do we even have a shot though?
You have to get in line at 6 a.m., right?
So the
That's comforting.
plan B is La Barbecue.
La Barbecue.
A barbecue?
Yep.
There we go.
Okay, so then you guys need to come tell us what to actually get at these places. If it's the brisket, if it's the pulled pork, let us know.
Yeah. And then a couple of other results on these questions. So when you were asked, I'm a win-loss analysis novice or somewhere in between was the majority. So don't feel like you're in a room full of experts here. I think only 2 people answered expert, so maybe they can
Come and talk to us.
Yeah. Or just you can come
quiz
up
you.
here and give the rest of the
They
presentation.
can join you on stage.
Yeah.
And then what is the biggest pain point you have with win-loss? The top answer was collecting enough data. And then right behind that was getting people to consume the insights. And then in third place was figuring out the best way to run a program. So that would be good for you guys to teach them that.
Good.
There you go. Okay, let's get some winners here.
And then let me pull up here the winner survey. I'm hoping somebody put like a super funky nickname. All right, so we have Matt Jones.
Matt Jones, here we go. Let's go.
There we go.
1 second. Scott Baker. And sorry, this is bad. One of the winners is somebody from Closed filled this out in the back. So,
Bailey.
alternate is Sarah Schneider. So
Sarah.
if you guys could just raise your hands for me. I've got the headphones now, so I'm not even gonna ask for your email. Like, we're still not gonna get that from you. So this is an ungated giveaway. So raise your hands and I'll bring them over to you right now.
Yeah, awesome.
Perfect. Well, hopefully that got everybody's attention. I like those. I have these headphones, great sound quality. I used them on the plane on the way here. So one thing that we really need to understand right out of the gate is what is win-loss analysis. People have different definitions. We're going to have our specific definition that we've come to understand is how we think about this. Win-loss analysis is the practice of systematically capturing and analyzing the reasons you win and lose sales opportunities to learn how to improve win rates and build sustainable competitive advantage. We're going to go back to that definition a couple of times as we go throughout this presentation, but one of the things I want to highlight here is that if you're not understanding the reasons why you win and lose business, you're not doing an effective win-loss program, which may seem really obvious, but we've run into so many situations where people have been doing this and they're not really getting the answer to that core question.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting verbiage that we use there. It's the systematic approach of understanding why you're winning and losing. And I think that begs the question that we like to answer of like why an organization should do it. And to me, it feels obvious. It feels obvious that we should systematically be understanding why we're winning and losing. We all love some stats. So Gartner actually put out research that suggested that organizations that run a rigorous win-loss analysis program can see win rates improve by as much as 50%, which to me is pretty significant. And as product marketing managers, we have a lot of ownership over that win rate, and we should be doing everything we can to try to increase that win rate. Now, 50%, that feels kind of abstract. We're going back to junior high for a minute to give a real world example of what that could actually look like. So assume your organization does $100 million in sales. Then also assume that you have a 20% win rate. Now that's the first question I want to ask everyone. Raise your hand if you actually know what your win rate is at your organization or for your product line or whatever it is. Yeah, there's like 7 of you. I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. I think this is a common problem that a lot of organizations are trying to solve for. We'd be happy to talk a little bit more about that afterward. Then let's say you want to increase your win rate. We'll assume a 10% improvement. Now that's not going from 20 to 30%. That's going from 20% to 22% would be a 10% increase. And just that small of a difference in this scenario is a $10 million annual revenue increase. And so imagine, based off of Gartner, an actual 50 would be going from a 20% to a 30% increase, which is extremely significant. Okay.
And the thing about this is, we're making this up, right? This is just an illustrative example. Think about your own organization and think about what it could do for your organization. The numbers don't have to be this big to make win-loss worth your time.
Totally.
Right? Like, to run a win-loss program, you're looking at way less than $10 million. You can do an effective win-loss program for, pennies of that. And for most of our clients, the way we think about it is, if you can just win one more deal as a result of understanding better why you win and lose, then it's going to be worth it. You have a positive ROI
investment
from just a single deal, one. Yeah. So imagine, if you win multiple deals, it pays for itself multiple times over. And there's a few different ways you can do that, whether you're doing it in-house with a vendor, but this is an investment that really makes sense financially.
Yeah. So understanding first that we need to do it, one of the biggest questions we get is who should actually own win-loss analysis in your organization. I think naturally we would probably assume someone in sales, right? Like they're closing the deals, maybe sales operations, sales enablement. Other organizations might think it's product team because they already are doing a lot of research. We actually believe that the best people that should be running win-loss analysis and owning that at an organization is product marketing managers. And here's why. We stole this from PMA. We'll give you guys credit. Like, this is a beautiful graphic that really shows product marketing at the center of sales, at the center of product, the center of marketing, customer success, and at the center of your customers. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I was a product marketing manager at Qualtrics for about 3 years. And in that time, we did something that we thought was pretty revolutionary at the time. This was about 10 years ago, where we created what we called a team of 4 for each of our product lines that we had at Qualtrics. And in that team of 4, there was a head of sales, a head of product, a head of engineering, and a head of marketing. And their whole goal was to go and drive value and sell as much as they possibly could of that product. And my job in that was to understand the customers better than anybody else so that I could effectively communicate to the product team what problems our customers are trying to solve. So I could effectively communicate to the sales team, here's what messages resonate. So I could go create content from the marketing standpoint. And so product marketing obviously fits at the center of that. And we believe that win-loss fits at the center of that. The insights that you garner from win-loss analysis is 100% aligned with it. When we run win-loss programs, we're finding out a ton of sales feedback. We're finding out a ton of product feedback and what actually resonated with them in the sales process. We're learning a ton of pricing and packaging, all of this coming from customers and prospects to really drive value back to the rest of the organization.
And that's one of the things I think that really is key about this concept of win-loss analysis. A lot of people looking at it for the first time think, oh, this is about the sales organization. The reasons a company wins and loses are not just attributable to the salesperson that they were working with, right? There's so many different dimensions of this. It's about how the product was packaged, about the features of the product. Maybe it's a service offering, maybe it's not a product at all. And maybe it's, how the service is structured. So there's a lot of different dimensions of this, and so that's why somebody like you that is at the center of all of this is uniquely enabled to bring all these parts of the organization together to conduct a win-loss program that's actually effective and drives change.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll mention on this is, we've talked a lot of the value that it's going to bring to an organization. The other part is selfishly for you, is what it actually does for you and your careers. We never really thought this would happen, but we hear all the time from product marketing managers that we work with is how much, because they have run the win-loss program, how much it's done for their career, how it's propelled them because they become the expert on the customer. We've seen countless promotions just solely based because they own the win-loss analysis program and they're driving so much change throughout the organization. So selfishly, who cares about the organization? Go do this for yourself.
Yeah, well, and it kind of goes back to the stat of Most companies that are doing win-loss have been doing it for less than 2 years. So it's very likely that a lot of people within your organization, they've never seen a systematic and careful approach to win-loss. So if you can bring that to your organization, you look like a visionary, you look like an innovator, and it's going to propel you. And I love hearing stories of people that have been working with us and then they say, hey, I just got a promotion and my boss told me that one of the main reasons was because I started win-loss at company X. So it's pretty exciting. So the question is, we've talked about how to, why this is important, and now I want to talk about what it actually takes to create an effective win-loss program within your organization. So this graphic that you see is illustrative, right? We don't have numbers here, but the message I think is going to be pretty apparent. There's the value you get out of the win-loss program, that's on your y-axis, and then there's the investment you put into your win-loss program. So there's different levels of investment, and most people start by doing nothing, obviously, right? But the interesting thing about this is there's no action necessarily, but this is when awareness happens. This is when awareness of, one, there's either an acute problem, okay, we've been losing a ton versus this competitor, or we entered into this certain market and we're not winning nearly as much in that market as we are in our home market. The wheels start turning here in this do nothing phase. You start to understand, okay, we need to understand why we're winning and losing, but then there's this big question mark of, well, what do we do? How do we effectively understand that in a objective, unbiased, and systematic way? What we found most companies do, and actually our founders did this before they started Close, but we've seen this as we've talked to a lot of different organizations, is they first look at what's the least expensive and the least labor intensive way to try to get information on this. So they look at internal data and internal people. They go to their CRM. A lot of CRM tools are well equipped to tell you important information, but maybe not all of the information that you need. You can run a query, you can run some reports, and you can find, okay, well, our win rate is X% here and X% here. Maybe it's against this competitor, or deal sizes over $100,000, we have a win rate of X and a win rate that's lower, maybe it's X minus 10% below $100,000. So you find out some interesting statistics like that. But at the end of the day, usually that's not enough to actually drive change.
Great starting point.
Yeah, it's a great starting point. You know where you need to go, but you have no idea why. And so a lot of people go to their sales organization, they ask the salespeople, they may know something, but they usually don't have all the information. So then a lot of us have some sort of market research experience, so they think, well, we need to do a project, we need to talk to buyers. And so the next step, what we commonly see, and this is the step that's kind of the linchpin between really bringing this into a systematic ongoing program or where win-loss dies. It's the one-off research project. Most people, when they start this, they try to do some outreach, they don't collect information. Apparently, based on our survey, that's one of the results, right? It's hard to actually get the data. So you might be reaching out to 100 people and then you only get a couple of responses. And then the information that you're getting back is so weak that you can't really share it. You don't feel confident enough to share it. But if one of these one-off research projects is executed effectively, it starts to give that little taste of how win-loss can benefit you in your organization. So it starts this snowball effect. And what we've found is that many companies in the world today are in markets that are changing so rapidly that just doing a one-off project, it will give you a good idea of what happened 3 months, 6 months ago. But by the time you actually collect the data and share it with the relevant stakeholders, it's already obsolete, or at least verging on obsolete. So what our approach is, and what we advocate, is you need to do this on an ongoing basis. You need to get the feedback to people in real time, because if you're not, you're always going to be behind the 8 ball. And so what many companies do is they start to think, okay, we need to do this on an ongoing basis, but let's start small. Let's start with, one geography or one market segment. And then the next step, once they do that, is saying, okay, we really need to look at our whole pipeline. And there's a couple of different ways to do that. Some are more effective depending on your type of business, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. Because when you get a look at your entire pipeline, then you're really understanding across your segments, across your geographies, why you're winning and losing business. And for a complex multi-product company, the answer may be very different depending on which of those buckets you're looking at.
Yeah, and I think we see a lot of organizations that are probably in stage 4, which is really advanced. Like, well, that's a really good place to be in, is the stage 4, but it's usually condensed to like my product or a very small subset of the pipeline. And that's the nuance of going from stage 4 to stage 5, is a comprehensive view of the entire pipeline across the entire organization, which, you know, for some organizations, if you're small, maybe that is one business unit. But for those that have infinite opportunities or infinite product lines, it can be very vast. And that's why we believe that the best way is to get a clear picture of the entire pipeline at your organization.
Should we stop for questions? We've been talking a lot. Any questions so far?
Let's get a microphone. We got a couple here. Trenton.
Let's see how fast he can run.
Right here.
Thank y'all for sharing all this information. It's super helpful. My question is, what strategies have you seen organizations use to quantify at scale the largely qualitative output that comes from win-loss surveys, and really drilling down even further past maybe the higher level categories such as, you know, price or maybe product capabilities, and making it more actionable for the rest of the organization?
That's a great question.
That's awesome.
We shouldn't have asked for questions because our next couple of slides talk about that.
We'll give you a teaser. So if you want to do this at scale, basically there's a couple of channels, and we've got more content on this, but there's a couple of channels that people typically use. There's interviewing and then there's surveying. And basically, you want to do interviews for your largest, most complex deals, and you want to survey when you've got more transactional, kind of low volume deals.
Yeah.
So that's the high level answer.
But then the deeper with that, I think you're asking about like categorizing the output of that. Again, something we'll dive a little bit more, but we refer to those as decision drivers, and how you actually effectively create those buckets based off of the data and how you deliver those. It can be complex. So wait just a few more minutes and we'll dive into that a little bit more. And if we don't fully answer, we can come back to you, okay? We had another question here.
You don't need it, I can talk about.
Helps the folks in the back.
So you snuck up on me. What's the ideal split between win versus loss on the analysis side? Do you weight more toward the win to facilitate more opportunity, more on the loss to facilitate improvements to the product?
Totally, great question. And I love that you acknowledge that, first of all, I think a lot of people don't even think they should be doing win, right? When they do think of win-loss, a lot of organizations think, I just want to look at my losses. But you also need to understand why you are winning. And so it's very important to make sure you have a mixture of that. And it changes across organizations. I'll give my take and then John can fill in. But what we have traditionally seen as the best mix is to map what your win rate is, right? So if you have a 25% win rate, I would say that 25% of the data that you receive should come from wins and the other 75% should come from losses. That's not super scientific. We have other organizations, it's a 50-50 split, just to make sure they're getting enough information on the wins and the losses. And so that's typically what we have seen for most organizations, is to follow the pipeline. Anything you'd add there?
And just to follow up on that, so like when we asked, you know, what's your win rate, most of us don't know. So 50-50 is actually the most common thing we see because people are kind of taking a shot in the dark. But what's interesting about that is people, they want to know why they lose immediately. And as a consultant, it's really depressing to just do a report on losses. Like I had a client.
Why you are not good.
Yeah. But I did this one presentation, and at the end, this guy was like, "Oh, look, we paid you a bunch of money to tell us everything that we're doing wrong. This was a great spend." It was just a little depressing. But besides that, more practically, it's actually not as useful because the underlying assumption of only doing losses is that if you just fix all the reasons that you're losing, you're going to win more. Well, the reasons that you win might be the same as the reasons that you lose, depending on the audience that you're selling to. So that's the that's the thought that people have is, oh, okay, I'll understand my losses and I'll fix all my loss reasons. But then if they don't understand their wins, they don't understand what's actually delighting people. So it's really important to have a mix of both. We've actually done programs that are only wins, and those aren't that great either, right? People get, there's a lot of rah-rah excitement, but then they don't get these actionable takeaways of, okay, what can I fix to win more? So having a good balance is something that's pretty important.
Yeah. Any others? Okay, yeah, we got a couple more. We'll take one or two more and then we'll jump back into it, make sure.
My question is, when you're trying to get a champion within the organization to go ahead with a win-loss, who would be the best person to start the conversation with? Would it be product? Would it be sales?
All of the above.
There's different opinions on that. Here's what we've found in practice. The sales organization is often the difference between success and failure here. And we're going to talk more concretely about how to engage these different stakeholders. Braden said all the above. That's true too. I would say if you don't have the buy-in of the sales organization, it will be really hard to get this off the ground.
It'll be hard to get off the ground, and it'll be hard for change to actually happen when you do get insights. Sales for sure is the number one organization that you want to have complete buy-in from.
Yeah, and when you do, it's catalytic. It's incredible what happens. There's this company that we're working with right now where their CRO is on every call we have with them, and it's amazing what's going on in their organization because everybody's bought in. And there's a top-down mandate saying, hey, all of you sales reps, you need to be reading these interviews. You need to be knowing what's going on. So I would say if there's one department, focus there, but as Braden said, like the more different stakeholders you can get involved, the better.
I think we had two more. We'll take these final two. So Trent, let's go here in the back and then we'll come right here.
Hi, yeah, thank you so much for all the learnings you've been sharing so far. My question is about the time frame from when the deal is closed and conducting the interviews. Like you said that, it can be obsolete because things change so fast. What would you say is the ideal time frame to actually reach out and conduct those interviews?
Yeah.
Good question.
It's a great question. Recency is extremely important. As fast as possible is for sure the best recommendation. We have done interviews where it's like a year old, and surprisingly are still able to get good data from that, but because of the in-depthness of that deal itself, right? Like usually we've seen a correlation between how large the deal is and how long the sales process lasted and their ability to retain knowledge compared to if it's, I was talking to someone for 3 phone calls and it was a $5,000 deal. They're not going to remember a year later what the decision drivers were for them. And so those are some of the factors to think through is like how complex was the deal, how big was it, and you can tend to go a little bit further away from when the close date was, but we try to recommend within a quarter, right? Like 3 months. Any deals that have closed within the last 3 months are ideal candidates specifically for interviews.
Yeah, the most successful program that I've seen right now, or at least one of the most, they pull a list of their closed opportunities every 2 weeks. And there's technological ways you can ease the pain of that because it's kind of a pain to pull all of that. But if you're doing this every 2 weeks, this decision is so fresh on people's mind, they can give you the full story and they can talk about maybe the first couple of stages of implementation of their new purchase. So yeah. Like Braden said, I think recency is key. I think we had one more question up here.
Hi there. As everyone kind of said in the room, how difficult it is to collect this data and also obviously have to partner with the sales org. So what recommendations do you have for like providing them with a framework for collecting that data or getting them capture it in the moment when the deal's closed? How do you partner with them to do that?
Yeah. So in practice, typically what it looks like is if you have an integration with some sort of software platform that pulls these things directly out of your CRM, that's the most real-time way to do it. Most companies are doing it, they're pulling deals periodically, either once every 2 weeks, once a month. That's probably what's most common. So I think the question was how do you actually do the outreach and how do you get people to respond? So you send them a lot of emails and you incentivize it. I mean, Braden, what else do you think?
Yeah, Yeah, like I think we often underestimate the amount of effort it might take to get people to agree to participate in some type of win-loss feedback. That's what I have an entire team dedicated to that. It's their job to ensure our participation rates are really high based off of the contacts that we're receiving from our clients. And so we do a ton of research on this as well to try to, how do we continually get a better participation rate across all the clients that we work with. And there's a lot of factors from industry to the buyer type that will affect those things. But the main recommendation I would say if you're doing this yourself is be more persistent than you would think. It's okay to be a little persistent and try to get people to engage in these types of different types of feedback.
And offering incentives makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
It's out people like money. So, and it doesn't need to be a lot, but there's this sense of, okay, you're compensating us for our time. The other thing that we offer is the opportunity to get a gift card versus, this is getting really into the nitty gritty, but versus donating to a charity. And so that's another thing that we do to juice the response. So for programs that we run, typically for interview programs, we can get a response in the neighborhood of around 20%. But like Braden said, like this is our full-time job. We've honed that through a lot of different experiments and how to get people to respond better.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all these questions. We'll dive back into this and we'll dive in a little bit more with some of the questions you guys had, and then we'll open it up for more questions later.
Yeah. So getting a little bit more granular on what makes a win-loss program effective, there's 8 traits that we've found. One that we've already touched on, I think that the comment made here is executive sponsorship. You have to get other people on board, right? This is the skill of the adept product marketer, is how do you get other people rallying towards your cause? It can make the difference between success and failure. And there's a couple of really tactical ways that we help people do that, but that's a key portion. Data channels. So are you collecting and analyzing your CRM data? Are you surveying and interviewing your sales reps? Are you surveying and interviewing your buyers? Those are all legitimate data channels to help you understand holistically why you win and lose. Effective questions. It's really interesting, and this goes back to, when we talked about the definition of win-loss at the beginning, you've got to understand why they won or lost. Like, you've got to understand why the decision was made. And sometimes it's just as straightforward as asking that question. But it's also the order of the questions that you ask and how you frame your whole line of questioning. That's super important. I've seen a lot of win-loss programs where people start out and they're getting all sorts of competitive intelligence, but when we look at this holistically, we don't actually know why they're winning and losing. So that starts with effective questions, and then making this an ongoing practice, right? Making sure that by the time you get the data and share it out, that it's not obsolete.
Yeah, I think the ongoing is an important part because it's not going to be perfect right off the bat. Making this an ongoing program allows you to change and get better with time. And so that's what we strongly recommend, is get started and realize it's not going to be perfect on day one, and that's okay. Getting started and learning from the feedback and learning how to set up the program is going to adapt over time, and that's completely okay. Being able to interpret results. We had a question around decision drivers. This is a really important part of being able to take all of this data that you're collecting, whether it's from interviews or surveys or these different data channels that John referenced, and being able to bring them into something that actually means something. And we refer to those as decision drivers, and we're going to dive into that a little bit more in just a second. Once you have that data, how do you actually effectively share those insights? And so sharing the findings and driving action is, to me, one of the most important parts of how do we actually, are we doing anything good with the insights that we're getting? And then lastly, measuring success. We've talked a lot about win rates. That's the key indicator of success on a win-loss program, is are our win rates actually improving because of the feedback and the changes we're making from this win-loss data? But it can't be more anecdotal than that. We hear a lot of feedback on, we changed our entire pricing model, we changed a lot of our product roadmap, we changed our sales training and methodology based off of the feedback that we're getting from win-loss analysis.
Yeah, and I think the bigger picture here is just, the whole point of doing this is to drive strategic change within the organization to allow you to win more. And measuring success is a key component of that. Like, we can do all of the analysis that you want to do, but unless we're actually making changes to drive action, then this is going to be a total waste of time. So that last point is so important.
Yeah. Another common question that we hear often is, Do we do surveys, or do we do interviews, or do we do both? And one of the first ways to answer that question is as simple as just understanding your pipeline. And so another table for us, or chart here for us, the y-axis being how large the deal sizes are, the amount of the opportunities. And then on the x-axis is how many opportunities you have going through your pipeline. Will help you have a first, at least, glance as to what you should probably do. And so what we see is organizations that have really large deal sizes, but maybe not a lot. Like we have some clients where they have 20 sales opportunities that go through the pipeline a year, but they're worth like $10 million each. It doesn't make sense for them to do a survey on a lot of these opportunities. They should probably just try to interview every single opportunity that goes through their pipeline. We have other clients, though, that are completely opposite on the spectrum. Go ahead, John.
One of the things I was going to say on that, so this morning we actually talked to a gentleman, Ben Tao. I don't know if you're here listening, but based on what you described about your business, it's definitely a mostly interviews type of business. You have really big transactions, and there's not a huge volume of them, but everyone makes a big difference for your business. So that's the type of experience you're going to see is when people are working in that type of framework. You're mostly going to do interviews. You're probably not going to get a lot of value out of surveys.
Yeah, and then we have the other end of the spectrum where they have massive opportunities, like thousands and thousands of opportunities go through their pipeline each quarter, but they're for, ranging from $1,000 to $10,000. It makes sense to try to send a survey to every single one of those sales opportunities and maybe do a few interviews, maybe on the larger deals, or to validate what you're hearing in the surveys, et cetera. But in that type of model, you're going to do a lot more of these surveys. And then we have other clients who are more in the middle. In fact, I would say a lot of our clients, or a lot of organizations, probably fall in this middle, where they should be doing a strong mixture of both based off of their pipeline. They have a lot of larger opportunities, but they also have maybe a lot more of the transactional deals. They should be trying to interview as many of those as they can and then sending a survey to literally everybody else. So we want to provide some now best practices. John talked about some data channels. You can go to your CRM, you can go to sales reps, you can go to your buyer. We want to spend the rest of the time particularly talking about buyer feedback because we believe that that's typically the richest source of data when it comes to win-loss analysis. And so there are two key ways to which you can do that, with a buyer survey or with a buyer interview. So we want to do a little bit diving deeper into each of these so you guys can actually have some solid takeaways. If you were to go do this today, what are some key things you can start doing tomorrow? So we'll start with the buyer surveys. This is a great opportunity to pull out your phones, take a picture of this, but the first thing is just keep it simple and brief. We typically recommend about 3 to 5 questions max on a survey. There's actually research that recommends that B2B buyers will not spend more than 3 minutes on a survey. So that's the most time you have with them, is 3 minutes to get any type of feedback from them in a survey. So keep it simple and brief.
Yeah, because so many of the people that we work with, they come from maybe a marketing research background, and their creative juices get flowing when they're designing these surveys, and they want to ask every question.
We've all been there. Don't pretend like you haven't.
Yeah, exactly. I know you've done this. I've done it. I get so excited about all my Likert, scales and everything, and then you've got this 20-minute survey, and then people are shocked that nobody responded, right? So that's the balance that you have to try to walk. Is let's get the questions that are going to give us the most valuable information, but make it really concise.
Be extremely intentional about the questions you're asking here. The next one is decision drivers. And to me, decision drivers are the most important part of any win-loss program. Being able to clearly pull out what are your strengths and your weaknesses. And we'll dive in just a little bit more in just a minute, but these are such a powerful part of a win-loss program, is it clearly categorizes and subcategorizes your outcomes as to why you're winning and losing. Get competitive information. Make sure you're finding out who the primary competitors are, if you're losing to nobody, et cetera. Again, I'm going to dive into points 2 and 3 a little bit deeper, so I don't want to give too much away there. 4 and 5, we talked about recency. And I think there's a nuance between surveys and interviews. If you're doing a survey, like recency is like the opportunity closes and a survey is automatically sent to that sales opportunity. Like that's recent. But then, like we mentioned earlier, you can go up to 3 months and still get a lot of really good insights depending on what your sales cycle looks like. And the last one is incentives. I think there's sometimes a concern around doing incentives potentially, like, is this going to bias the data? Are we going to just get people that are only doing this for money? there's infinite peer-reviewed research about this that suggests that it's fine. It doesn't do anything to skew any of the data, and it actually does increase the participation rate. And so if you're doing a survey, we'd say probably like $5 per response that you get is suffice. If you're doing an interview, we typically see around $50, makes a lot more sense. But again, it depends on the buyer. Maybe you have someone really senior trying to you got to make it worth their time, et cetera. So diving really quickly into two of these, utilizing the decision drivers. So what you see on the screen is an example of what we would categorize some of our decision drivers around, which are product and solution, the sales experience, pricing and packaging, our company and brand. These are just a few examples of what some of the decision drivers could be that you come up with for your surveys. But you'll also notice, if you can't see it, there's an arrow that you can drop down so that you can get some of the subcategories or the sub-themes of what we'd call that. So for example, if you're talking about sales experience, you might have demo personalization, you might have sales rep feedback, right? Like these are some of the drop downs that you can have based off of what you're seeing. And so yeah, allowing them to provide feedback on multiple, and then the other side is to make sure that they can provide positive and negative feedback for each of these decision drivers, so that you're getting a really clear understanding of what's coming to the top from here are your strengths, here are your weaknesses, let's go make some changes based off of that.
And usually when people start these programs, and this is kind of going back to the just get started, your decision drivers aren't going to be that great the first time you give it a shot. It takes some thinking, and it takes some information collecting to really come to an understanding of what are the key categories that I'm gonna design around my feedback. What you see here, these are categories, right? And there's kind of sub-themes or sub-decision drivers within those categories, but there's some that are common across most companies, like sales process. You're gonna see that in almost every one of our win-loss programs, but each one of your organizations is nuanced and different. And so there's a balance of trying to create themes that are narrow enough that they're actually actionable, because if they're too broad, if they say something like product capabilities, that's not going to give you anything, right? But they can't be so narrow that you don't see trends. So you want to be able to have something that strikes that balance. So at the end of collecting a whole bunch of surveys, you can see, okay, well, it looks like in 20% of cases, this particular decision driver was tagged. Maybe we should do something about that. Those are the kind of takeaways that you're wanting to get. So beginning with the end in mind and really thinking about, okay, what are the big takeaways that I want here, and not creating a proliferation of decision drivers, but also not making your categories so general that they're not actionable.
Yeah. The other part that I want to emphasize here, particularly with surveys, is to make sure, it seems obvious, but to collect the competitive information. And why we even want to make a point of that is, if you're relying on the competitive information that sales reps are giving you in your CRM, you're likely looking at flawed data. In fact, we've seen that oftentimes where we had clients that were trying to really dive into a specific competitor, and so they pulled from their CRM a list of 100 opportunities that went head-to-head against this competitor. We went and did the interviews, and 60% of them were with different competitors. And so being very intentional and allowing yourself to collect the actual competitor, this is your opportunity to finalize and get a definitive, this is who our main competition actually is. And so the 2 points I want to make here is if you do have a lost opportunity, to confirm whether it's lost to a competitor or to no decision. And I think we overlook the no decision too frequently. We assume there's always a competitor, but oftentimes we might be focusing on the wrong competitor. If you're losing to no decision, that's extremely telling for your organization or for your offering. It can tell you that maybe the product actually isn't that valuable to the organization. Maybe your value propositions aren't lined up to what customers actually care about. And so if you can learn if you're losing to actual competitors or to nothing, like if Excel does everything for their job and they don't need your solution, that should tell you everything you know of what you need to go and do. The other side with this is, regardless of won or lost, make sure you're getting a definitive primary competitor in that survey.
Love talking about interviews. Before we do, should we have a couple of more questions? What questions do you have? If we don't have any, we can just start talking about interviews. Yeah, go ahead.
Make sure this guy doesn't sneak up on me. So how quickly do you do future win, future loss surveys? Not just at the end, but to sell more to the same customer. Do you do any best practices around that?
Like you're saying there was an upsell opportunity that was lost?
No, like let's say you won the deal, you want to come back in and you want to do a future win-loss. So like, what does it take for me to win the next deal with you? What does it take for me to do or lose the next deal with you?
Yeah, that's a great question. We typically will do like a customer satisfaction interview at that point, is what we would call that, which can lead to upsell opportunities, but the point of win-loss is never to try to sell more. And I think that's an important nuance, is to make sure that like these interviews are exclusively to collect data and not try to sell, which is, sometimes the value of using a third party is we're not going to try to sell our client services to the individual. So in that case, we typically would do just like a customer satisfaction where the interview guide is a little bit more nuanced to how has it been since you've been a customer.
Yeah, once they start to think that you're trying to sell them, then they stop giving you information.
But I do think that you'll get a lot of upsell opportunities just from those conversations.
Yeah, we've had so many interviews where it actually reignites a sales process that was previously thought to be dead, that's not typically what we see as the benefit that we're advertising here, but that's just naturally what happens. As we do an outreach, people love talking about how they make decisions and they like the gift card and they're like, maybe I should have thought more about company X. Maybe we should reach out, and then we connect them to the salespeople and it reignites the sales process. We got some questions on the board. What strategies have you seen organizations use to quantify at scale? I think we answered that one. Could you please expand on the topic of data channels? What channels are critical for me getting insights into the win-loss program? Data out versus in?
I think we answered that one as well. Anonymous, did we not answer that one? It was you.
Too anonymous, so I don't have a lot of questions. CRM seems helpful to grab the data that facilitates the win-loss program, but what about once you have that data from within the win-loss program from the surveys, getting it out into other channels to actually drive further utilization of the data? Are there any channels that come to mind?
Well, we don't want to sell ourselves, but closed. We have proprietary software that allows you to evangelize the data in a very easy manner. Other organizations have leveraged things like Tableau as part of like their or whatever BI solution that you're using. They'll leverage that and put the win-loss insights into those reports as well. John, what do you think?
Yeah, that's what we built our company around. The purpose here is not to sell necessarily, but I think whatever you do, it's like those dashboarding tools can be super valuable. The challenge that we found is that, especially if you're trying to get in front of executives don't log into dashboards. Most of them do check their email. So having integrations through email or Slack or some sort of other, Teams, other instant messaging tools, that's pretty critical.
Yeah. We do have other clients though that will hold a regular ongoing win-loss insights meeting with the leadership team or throughout the organization. Like that's a great way to evangelize it as well. Especially again, going back to the executive buy-in early on, like if you have that early on, like they're gonna want to see the insights. And so making that a part of the cadence is regularly giving them the insights that you're collecting is gonna be a big part of that.
Why not just train the sales org to ask a short why question upon deal close or loss? Well, that depends on how much you believe people are actually going to share the true reasons with your sales organization.
Yeah.
So sometimes the sales organization does know, and that's why these multiple channels are really interesting. If you're getting feedback from your sales reps and your buyers, you're going to see in some cases everything jives pretty well, but in some cases it's so contradictory, it's shocking.
Yeah, sales is definitely a good channel to get feedback from, whether it's a survey or an interview with your sales team. It can be skewed though. There's research that suggests that sales reps typically do not know why they won or lost a deal about 60% of the time. Whether they're intentionally trying to save face or whether they just don't know, right? Like if the salesperson is the reason they lost the deal, the client's not going to tell them directly even if they ask. And so I think those are some of the reasons why the sales route is good, but it's far better to go directly to the decision maker and the person that made and the buyer there.
I think there was a question, it just disappeared, but how often do you typically read out with with your key stakeholders? Our standard is quarterly, I think, but what you need to think about is how long does it take to get a critical mass of feedback that is big enough to see trends. And typically a rule of thumb that we see is you need to do at least 20 interviews or collect at least 100 survey responses. Preferably
on a specific segment.
Yeah.
20 interviews on a specific segment or 100 responses on a specific segment in order to get something from those.
Yeah. So we have people we work with that do it monthly, but these are large companies with really high deal volume.
Rose, how are we on time? I think we started a little early. Are we okay?
We're doing well on time, and the way the questions will work is if you not just ask your questions, but if you upvote them, that'll pop up on the screen.
Okay.
And then I've got the full list here, so we've got 15. I can try to feed them to you guys. Yeah, we have at least about 10 more minutes to go if you all want to keep going.
Okay.
We have a couple more slides I think we want to cover on the interview side, and then we'll jump back to the questions if we have just a couple more minutes after that. If that's
Great.
So we'll go back to the interview slides. Do we have those? Perfect. There we go. Best practices for buyer interviews. So really simply, our top 3 best practices. And we can talk, I love talking about this, so if you want to come to our booth and ask more questions, that's awesome. But first thing is create the right interview guide. The word guide is really important here. Some people use the term script. What we believe is the best way to conduct these types of interviews is make it so you're not asking the same question in the same order every time. For some people that have a background in marketing research, you might start to cringe a little bit, but here's the thing. When you do that and you ask the same question in the same order every time, so often you actually lose the whole objective of why you're doing this is to understand why you win and lose. I've seen interviews done where people are asking, they're going down their script and they say, so why did you make the decision you made? And they say, oh, well, it was this particular product feature. And then the next question they ask is, so what did you think about your sales rep? And it's like, no, you need to drill down on that. You need to be flexible enough and be asking the types of questions that are going to get you to the heart of the matter. And having an interview guide that's flexible, that allows you to go through and target your questions to the things that you really want to know is super helpful. Which kind of leads to the next thing, engage in a genuine conversation. Nobody likes to be read to from a script. If these interviews are going to be done effectively, you need to engage people. You need to find out where they are, what they're doing, what they're doing in their company.
Have empathy.
Have empathy, right? They're going to open up more if you do that. And then find out why the deal was won or lost. I think I've said that 5 times. I don't think I can say it enough. That is the whole goal of this.
Yeah, and which is why we recommend you don't do a script, because that can make you lose the opportunity of, to us, if John does an interview and I go and ask him why did they win or lose, and he can't clearly articulate that, he has not done his job in that interview of why we are actually doing this. If it's a script and, I asked all these different questions, you can't answer why you actually won or lost, you've missed the point on those interviews.
Okay, so just diving in a little bit deeper, I love this QR code. It gives you some sample interview questions. So
this is not gated. Again,
it's not gated.
This is a great resource.
Yeah, we're not.
You have one gated material. I'm sorry, it's not this one though.
Yeah. So those are some questions that you can ask, right? We typically start with a pretty standard set of questions and we customize it based on the companies that we're working with. But for starters, keep it flexible. You want to create a guide that it's not linear. It allows you to move across topics. Structure the guide. So the 3 levels or the 3 layers that we typically recommend you structure the guide in are general topics. These are things like sales, product, pricing. Then there's headline questions. These are questions that you're going to ask most of the time that are these big overarching questions. And then optional drill downs, which are really important because if you get an interesting answer to the headline question, you want to ask maybe 2 or 3 optional drill downs to get deep on that decision. And oftentimes people haven't really thought as carefully about their decision as they did in the interview. Sometimes you're actually helping them understand for the first time, oh, this is really what the crux of the decision was, and asking those follow-on questions will help you uncover that. Soliciting feedback. So this is one of the ways we talked about getting executive buy-in. It's not just at the end when you're sharing the results. It's when we've created this draft where we've structured the guide, give it to the people that actually can affect change in your organization and let them take a stab at it.
Yeah.
Let them see, okay, what are the kind of questions I want to ask? Because then there will be more ownership, and when the results get shared, they're more likely to act on those.
Yeah, there's a ton of power in allowing the individuals to provide feedback. Like, take it to the head of sales and let them ask questions that they would want asked. And the main value of this is to help them feel engaged through the entire process, so that when you do get feedback, they'll be receptive to it because they were part of building this program with you. And so it's extremely important to get this leadership buy-in and help them actually be a part of it on day one, so that they are a proponent of it the entire process.
Yeah, and then the last thing is iterate as you learn. So usually the first couple of interviews that you do are not the best ones. You're gonna learn some things, you're gonna look at the transcripts from those interviews and say, oh, I should have asked this question here, I should have asked that question there. Well, change the guide, right? Make sure your upcoming interviews are better than your first couple. You don't wanna change it too dramatically, but you wanna change it enough to where you're really hitting on the points that are most important. So last thing, this slide looks awkward, doesn't it? There's this strategic change box that's just sitting out there. So many times, research drives insight, but then there's this chasm. There's this missing piece between insight and strategic change. And this is something that I've seen here at Closed. I've also seen it, but I really became aware of this at my previous job when I was working at the boutique consulting firm Cicero Group. It's so hard to get people to actually do something as a result of these insights. So the key effect is making a connection between insights and strategic change. And what we believe is effective communication. So there's a couple of different ways to do that. So often I see a program done where people create this 50 slide PowerPoint deck. They do one presentation and then it just sits in a Google Drive and it never gets looked at again. So that's where a couple of key points that we think can facilitate that communication and actually keep it top of mind for your key stakeholders. One, embrace transparency. Don't be an insights bottleneck. If you're only sharing this with 5 people, your chances of success are a lot lower than if you're sharing it with 100. Sometimes this is culturally uncomfortable for people. They don't want to be that transparent in the organization. But when we've seen win-loss done most effectively, every single interview is being published and shared with literally hundreds of people across the organization. And that's the next thing, is push relevant insights to key stakeholders in real time. Don't wait for your quarterly readout. Give people little snippets, Whether you have Slack channels or email, however you're doing that, you want to give it to people in real time so they're seeing what's going on. And it makes it exciting because let's say you're a sales leader, you just learned about this big deal that you lost with some huge company, and you find out 2 weeks later what people said about why they made the decision. That's way more powerful than a quarter or 6 months later when everybody's forgotten that deal. So the real-time feedback is huge in the communication and sharing it broadly.
Okay. We've covered a ton. We appreciate all the questions. We'll open up for questions in a second, but if you want to learn more, if you have additional questions, come and talk to John and I at the booth. We're right out if you go out this door. You can download our win-loss guide. So the QR code here will take you directly to our win-loss guide, which is a very comprehensive, everything we've talked about has come from this guide. So use this as an opportunity to learn more. If you want, we're having tacos tonight at 7 p.m. downstairs. What's it called?
Austin Taco Project.
Yeah, so go get drunk and then come and meet us downstairs and get a little bit more drunk.
We're buying tacos and drinks.
Yes.
So it's at the Austin
Open
Taco
bar,
Project
so
downstairs.
come get plastered.
On the house. Yep.
And then you can email John or I. These are our direct email addresses. If you have questions, we'd love to answer them. So do we have time for a couple more questions?
Absolutely. And based on how many are in here, it sounds like the crowd definitely wants to hear some more. As I mentioned, if you want to see that one question pop up to the top of the screen, you have to give it more than 3 upvotes, right? So then the most upvoted ones get there. And then I'm going to try to read them as they jump around on my phone. Then, of course, stop me if we already did it. But this one says, larger enterprises may have requirements preventing marketing from mass email customers. For example, for a survey, how can you pursue customer data at scale?
Good question. We've run into this actually pretty often. There's a few different ways you can get around it. Sometimes there's rules preventing third parties from doing the outreach, so you can do the outreach yourselves, and we can coordinate that. So that's something to think about, is if you're having a third party do the outreach versus doing it internally, there's usually some sensitivity around that. But I think you've got to figure out how to coordinate the outreach with other parts of the organization that are doing outreach. And to me, that really goes back to getting the buy-in of your sales organization.
Exactly what I was going to say. Like, this comes back to, if your CRO is driving this, a head of sales op is not going to have control whether or not you get access to the names, right? Like, this is why it's so important to have the leadership bought into the value of this program, is because it will remove the majority of the bottlenecks you may run into of getting enough contacts in order to go and fulfill the program.
Okay, should we do this one's most upvoted. From our experience, getting closed-loss interviews is challenging, even with incentives, which can impact the confidence of the findings. Any recommendations?
Yeah.
This is Braden's specialty. I'm going to let him ask.
I'd love to come and talk directly with you, actually, but just generally, it can be a challenge. This is one benefit that we do have, and again, we're not trying to sell, but like a neutral third party becomes very valuable at that point, because they don't feel like that feedback is going to get directly back to that individual if there is negative feedback. Typically, that's one of the common reasons as to why they may not engage with you, is like they have very negative feedback and it was a poor experience and they don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. Another side of it is probably persistence. Again, whoever you are, I'd love to understand like what your process currently is, and I'm sure we could give you some pointers to improve that a little bit. But we engage typically, our default is email of how we try to get people to engage. We use things like Calendly to make it very easy for them to schedule the interview rather than like coordinating schedules back and forth, or Calendly or something like that. There's a lot out there. Then at times, if we've needed to, we'll call people. We'll do some cold calling to try to get. So there's a lot of different channels that you can leverage to try to get more responses. But I think it's Devin, come and chat with me, and I'd love to dive a little bit deeper with you.
How do you handle win-loss program designed for a product that has multiple competitors? So I think every piece of feedback that you get, you might have a different competitor. And one of the things that we typically do, you can put this in your surveys, or you can wrap it into the way you structure your interview conversation, is ask questions like, okay, if you hadn't chosen X, was there a runner-up? That's how you get the primary competitor. But then follow up, okay, was there anybody else that was really in the running here? In most situations, what I've found, there's usually about 3 companies that really had a shot at the business. They might list 7 or 8, but probably 4 or 5 of them were removed after a pretty cursory review. So that goes back to designing the right questions, to really understanding, okay, if it's a win interview, okay, if you hadn't chose us, who would you have chosen? But then, who else was there? Let's understand what did they do well? Why did they get so far in the evaluation?
And
really probing on that can help.
That typically isn't best served in a survey. Like for a survey, I would recommend just trying to find the main competitor. Maybe you could have a follow-up question that lists all of your competitors. This is a great opportunity in an interview to dive deep into each of the key competitors. Like John said, if there's 3, we typically will follow up on the 3 competitors that were the main finalist in that decision, and get a lot of good feedback about all of those competitors.
So I think we answered the next one, quarterly but more often if you have more data. How do you engage a lost customer after you have lost a deal? So yeah, I think we addressed that.
Yeah, it's not much different than a win. Maybe you could engage a higher incentive as needed, but we historically see that there's obviously wins are more likely to participate compared to lost or churn, but we still get a ton of the lost feedback.
Yeah, the last one is interesting. How do you recommend doing win-loss at the product level or at the solution level? One thing we haven't talked a lot about, and we don't really have time to go into depth here, is churn interviews or customer satisfaction interviews, but we do a lot of programs where we're talking to people that have been a user of a product for a particular period of time and then they've left. What's interesting about those is you actually usually get more in-depth product feedback because people have actually been in the product using it, maybe even on a daily basis. In a traditional win-loss interview, usually their product feedback is mostly perception. They're just getting whatever they got in the demo, right? Or maybe they did a short trial or POC, but they don't have this day-to-day, okay, we actually use this to run our business type of experience. So churn interviews have been a pretty effective way of getting that type of deeper product feedback.
Yeah. We out of time here?
There's a great one here. It says, how does win-loss strategy change when expanding into a new market?
How does win-loss change?
When expanding into a new market. So, good point. I think, one, you might want to not start immediately when you've launched a new product, but you shouldn't start too late either. When you launch a new product, you want to see how people are receiving that in this new market. So getting feedback and then understanding it in real time is pretty useful. I mean, there's a lot of different scenarios that this could encapsulate. So we probably should talk offline after this. So come to the booth and maybe we can talk more about that. But
yeah, but I think that's a prime opportunity to start getting feedback. Like right after you launch a new product or going into a new market, like getting that direct feedback early on is going to help shape the rest of the course of that product or market. Okay, I think we'll call it. I think you guys have heard enough of us. I'm sick of hearing my own voice and John's voice. So thank you so much.
Everybody.
We've loved this
engagement.
Please come and talk to us afterward.
All right, excellent job, guys. Thank you. I think definitely several of us could have stuck around and just peppered you all with questions today, but it has been a fun time, and now it is a time to get to know each other. So we have a little bit of a break. We'll have some time to mingle and get to know some folks, and we will be back in this room at 11:15. So check your watches, and 11:15 we will start things back up here. See you there.
The Product Marketing Alliance membership is an incredible resource for product marketers with all types of experience.
It's definitely a goldmine of information and resources, from the Slack community to the templates and resources.
I can go out and see how are other people thinking about their growth strategies or product adoption. How are others thinking about the best ways to do customer interviews, or how others are setting up the content and customer advisory boards.
There's some great real life examples that I can either make a copy of or take as inspiration and really make my own.
Getting access to the videos and the templates is more than worth the cost, because you get to see what the top PMMs are doing and how they think.
From persona frameworks to go-to-market templates to articles written by experienced product marketers, this content has become an additional resource to help me succeed at my job.
My personal favorite is the Mentorship Program. It's definitely been a game changer for me.
When I have some planning time available, I love to look at the different videos and conferences that they have posted. I always love to hear how other companies are handling some of the challenges and opportunities that product marketing has.
I could then figure out what's the best way to adapt for us, as well as look at how other people are implementing them. So I can ultimately do the work of 5 individuals as a solo PMM.
Whether you're just transitioning into the field or you're a product marketing expert, I think there's content and materials that are useful for everyone.
And as someone looking to break into the role, I get a good grasp of what I should be doing and also what will make me successful.
And tools.
This whole program's been very validating for me in my career.
And so I highly encourage you to check out.
I believe they keep pushing the bar and supporting their members to ensure that we become experts in the field.
What's it like to be a product marketer in 3 words?
Challenging, rewarding, and collaborative.
What, in 3 words? Humbling, exciting, and rewarding.
It's very diverse. It's very, very collaborative, rewarding, super cross-functional. I find it to be super fast-paced, strategic, when you have to take a lot of insights from different parts of the business.
Unique, invigorating, but also often frustrating. Those are the 3-word ones are the hard ones.
Okay,
Welcome to your PMA Pro membership, your gateway to continued professional product marketing development. Whether you're new to the industry or an experienced practitioner, we've covered all bases with our variety of specialist content, including on-demand presentations, templates, exclusive content, mentors, toolkits, learning paths, and more. So let's take a look at exactly what could be all yours as a pro member. Starting with exclusive articles, jam-packed with in-depth insights from experts at companies like Google, LinkedIn, HubSpot, and Drift. And we add new pieces to your dashboard every single week. Your template hub is packed with 50 plus vetted and tested templates and frameworks designed to streamline fundamental processes. Used by companies such as Slack, Microsoft, Twitter, and TikTok, rest assured, you and your team will be equipped with the best materials to enhance your practice. And better yet, we add new templates into your plan every month. Here at PMA, we have a busy event scheduled year-round. And as a pro member, you'll get access to every presentation on demand to enjoy whenever and wherever you please. Better yet, you won't have to pay a cent to attend our virtual festivals and summits. The discounts don't stop there either. As a pro member, you'll also get 10% off our suite of certification programs. After a structured learning experience, then our product marketing learning paths and toolkits are for you. Whether you've got a positioning overhaul on the horizon, want to upskill in sales enablement, or plan for next quarter's product launch, each toolkit and path features presentations, templates, and guides that'll help you hit the ground running and continue your professional development furthermore. Moving on to our peer councils. They're the perfect platform for live, virtual interaction, and the monthly gatherings allow you to connect with an intimate pod of product marketing leaders to strategize and collaborate. And last but not least is our mentor program. Whether you want to be a mentor, mentee, or both, you can accelerate your personal and professional growth by learning from product marketing heavyweights all over the world. So, with product marketing teams at globally recognized brands such as IBM, TikTok, Uber, and Amazon reaping the benefits of the stellar content on offer, why shouldn't you? Sign up for your PMM Pro membership and access a never-ending flow of tried, tested, and recommended tactics, learn from the leading lights in the industry, fast-track your professional development, and accelerate your career trajectory. Welcome to your PMA Pro membership, your gateway to continued professional product marketing development. Whether you're new to the industry or an experienced practitioner, we've covered all bases with our variety of specialist content, including on-demand presentations, templates, exclusive content, mentors, toolkits, learning paths, and more. So let's take a look at exactly what could be all yours as a pro member. Starting with exclusive articles, jam-packed with in-depth insights from experts at companies like Google, LinkedIn, HubSpot, and Drift. And we add new pieces to your dashboard every single week. Your template hub is packed with 50 plus vetted and tested templates and frameworks designed to streamline fundamental processes. Used by companies such as Slack, Microsoft, Twitter, and TikTok, rest assured, you and your team will be equipped with the best materials to enhance your practice. And better yet, we add new templates into your plan every month. Here at PMA, we have a busy event scheduled year-round. And as a pro member, you'll get access to every presentation on demand to enjoy whenever and wherever you please. Better yet, you won't have to pay a cent to attend our virtual festivals and summits. The discounts don't stop there either. As a pro member, you'll also get 10% off our suite of certification programs. After a structured learning experience, then our product marketing learning paths and toolkits are for you. Whether you've got a positioning overhaul on the horizon, want to upskill in sales enablement, or plan for next quarter's product launch, each toolkit and path features presentations, templates, and guides that'll help you hit the ground running and continue your professional development furthermore. Moving on to our peer counts